Brilliant. Hi there, everyone. I'm just going to give it a few seconds for everyone to filter through, and then we will get started for the fourth installment of this Xero for Groups, the App Advantage series. And in this session, we're going to be focusing on spend management. It's been an incredible start to the series so far, and really looking forward to this session. Okay, brilliant. Well, look, thank you so much for joining. I'm sure we'll have more people filtering through as we go, but let's get started. So just a couple of housekeeping points to start us off. So there's the Q&A section in the controls. Please do fire through any questions as we go. We've got some time set aside for Q&A later in the session. The plan for today: I'm going to run through some intros to start us off. We're then going to get into the discussion around what multi-entity businesses with Xero can do when it comes to spend management. We've got time for a Q&A, and then I'll briefly cover what's coming up over the remainder of the series. And so in terms of intro, I'll start with myself. So my name's David Tuck. I'm the co-founder and CEO here at Mayday, and also the co-founder and CEO of CFO Techstack. I'm an accountant by training, spent the first 5 years of my career at Deloitte, did my qualifications, was twice a Xero using finance leader of multi-entity businesses, and I've been an accounting tech entrepreneur for the last decade. I was previously the founder of Chaser, the accounts receivable solution, and I spent the last 3 years building Mayday with my co-founder Griff and our growing incredible team. And so at Mayday, we're for larger Xero users. The majority of our customers, like Becky, have in-house finance teams. Our mission is to mend month end, starting with the needs of multi-entity businesses. So intercompany recharges and automating those, cross-entity bank reconciliation, keeping intercompany loans in balance. Our most recent review on the Xero App Store is titled Where Beautiful Accounting Software Meets Marvelous Multi-Entity Month End. And we've also broadened out into single entity pain points. So we now have the ability to automate the reallocation of costs and revenues between departments within an entity. Now, the backdrop to this series is we won Xero's Emerging App Partner of the Year in April last year. We held a shamelessly titled webinar called Mayday, What's All the Fuss About, with a couple of our customers. And out of that, came this broader idea of two key questions. So, is Xero still the right system for me as a larger kind of SME with an in-house finance team? And if the answer to that is yes, how long will that be the case for? Indefinitely, or what will be the point that I outgrow it? The nature of uncertainty is that when we don't know something, it leads us to act earlier. The ERP move is widely recognized as horrible and hectic, as one of our customers describes it, punitively expensive, and all of that is before 58% of ERP implementations fail. So we have this idea of what we call ERP peace of mind, the peace of mind that I can successfully scale and thrive with my SME, with Xero, as my cloud accounting system. But the issue is there's an absence of precedent. So too many businesses make the wrong decision in the absence of precedent, the stories around what it's possible to do with Xero and its ecosystem. And so last September, we held our Building an Enterprise Level System with Xero webinar series, 800 registrants, incredible feedback, and we rolled that into our CFO Techstack community, the mission of which is to create the resource that I wish I'd had as a Xero using finance leader, filling the content and community gap to address that unmet need, closing the awareness gap, demystifying and showing what it's possible to do with Xero plus its ecosystem, and ultimately providing that precedent that has been missing. We have a weekly newsletter that gets amazing kind of feedback for the value it delivers. We've launched the FLAC, the Finance Leader Advisory Council, the representative body for finance leaders that use Xero. And watch this space for details of Stacked coming up in September, the equivalent of XeroCon for in-house finance leaders. Now, this series, this is all about being a group of companies that use Xero. I've got a couple of questions that I'm going to put up on screen now, just to get a bit more information about who we have joining us today. So please do answer those over the next minute or so. Now, this series, it's very much about how can we be useful to our target customer. It's not product marketing. It's not about how to build a best-in-class app stack. There's a reason I'm not wearing a Mayday t-shirt for any of these webinars. It's about righting a misconception that it's not possible to kind of scale well into your growth phase as a group of companies using Xero. But it's not about overcorrecting. It's not about saying that Xero is this panacea that every business, every group can scale with for the remainder of time. We don't want to replace one myth with another. There will be times where it's right to move to an ERP system. So we want to kind of highlight those where relevant as well. So let's just bring up those survey results to see who we have joining us today. Amazing. So the majority of us, vast majority of us, are already using Xero, and we have a lot of groups amongst us. So a few like really big ones, and then a lot of kind of 2 to 10 entity groups. Amazing. Thank you so much. So look, I'm really excited to welcome you to this latest webinar in the series. Xero is all about beautiful business. This series is about how to be a gorgeous group. And you know, what better backdrop from that into introducing my panel for today. We've got Asif, we've got Chloe, and we've got Becky. And so over to you. So perhaps Becky, if you could start us off, and then we'll go to Asif, and then we'll go to Chloe to provide some brief intros, please.
Hi everybody, my name is Becky. I'm the finance director for a company called Saragossa. We are a group of 3 entities across the UK and the US within the recruitment and consultancy space. We've used Xero since 2020, and we were one entity, 9 million turnover at that point. We're now around 30 million across the 3 entities. And I'm happy to be here and have a chat about Pleo and other spend management solutions.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Becky. Asif, over to you.
Thanks, David. Hi, everyone. My name's Asif. I head up the early stage team at Parry, which is a large accounting firm. When I say early stage, all of my portfolio is typically scaling venture-backed technology businesses. And we probably have the largest concentration in the industry, but we sort of pride ourselves on working with them from inception all the way to exit. And so we often come across the question around challenges as you scale, and particularly technology challenges as you scale. So excited to get into this.
Amazing. And Chloe, over to you.
Hi everyone, I'm Chloe and I lead the customer success team for the UK at Pleo. Last 10 years have been in client-facing roles, and of that from recently Pleo, where I've had the experience to work with a range of different customers, particularly obviously in the group stages as well, for everything spend management and optimizing that there for them.
Amazing. Well, look, thank you so much to Becky, to Asif, and to Chloe for joining us today. It's a powerhouse panel, and so I'm really keen to dive into the webinar. For starters, and I think this is particularly acute for this webinar because spend management is a still relatively new category of software. So, you know, what do we mean by spend management, and why is it important? So, Becky, I'd love to come to you first.
Sure. So I think for us as a business, like we're in recruitment, so we're a sales business, so the majority of our costs are our people costs, but that doesn't mean that everything else can't get wildly out of hand if it's not properly managed. When I joined Saragossa, all of our expenses were done on Excel and we used Sage 50, and during COVID we moved across to Xero, and in 2021 brought Pleo on board to support with kind of just our general expenses. You know, prior to that we had one company credit card that would get loaned around, not exactly something I probably want to be bragging about too much, but that was kind of the reality of you know, a corporate Barclay card at the time. And I think that what the changes in the spend management place have just brought a huge amount of flexibility to businesses like ours, where we have people that are, you know, traveling day to day across various office sites, buying travel, taking clients out for lunch, managing our software spend, and really using a tool like Pleo gives us the opportunity to see all of that in one place. So the visibility of it is also really crucial to us.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Becky. Really rich. Asif, I'd love to come to you. What do we what are we talking about when we talk about spend management from your perspective?
Yeah, and so I mean, it's particularly important for a lot of our clients who, raise venture capital or investor capital, because you ultimately always want to have transparency around how money is being spent around an organization, not least for your own controls purposes, but to be able to have that transparency with your stakeholders. And a critical sort of second dimension to that is that there are notoriously very few people in the organization who can spend the time and manage that all at the same time. So how do you cross that section between not having anyone to look after it, but then it needing looking after? And where we found the spend management tools really come into their own is even when they are maybe slightly overkill for smaller businesses, what they do is sort of lend a forcing function to an organization to have a controls mechanism around how much money is being spent and where, which actually, in the absence of having a huge and flourishing finance department, can actually hold the line on that as a replacement really well. So for us, not least is it just something that helps with automation and efficiency. It also helps with plugging a gap on resource, which a lot of our early stage clients have.
Amazing. And Chloe, I'd love to bring you on this, because like I said, if I think back to my my time as a finance leader, so the last time I was sort of CFO was sort of over a decade now, and at that point spend management wasn't a sort of category of software that was in the vocabulary. So position it for our audience around what is this new category?
Wow. So yeah, I guess for us it's a way, I guess, as you say, like as Asif mentioned, like how do you get more from less in a sense? How do we consolidate everything to provide that oversight, that control that you need within a finance team? So we at Pleo try to, we started off very simple. It was all about providing a card so that you could spend on the card, and then that would be flowed through. And then as a finance team, you can see how everybody is spending, where as Becky mentioned previously, companies were using one credit card that was being thrown around, and that's scary for somebody to think how that's being done. So the idea really is to see how can we consolidate everything into one place? How can we make it very simple for employees to spend and not let that limit their day-to-day and for them to get on with their roles, but also keep that control and that necessary overview for organizations and help them optimize the business in that way.
Amazing. So that if we think about it from a sort of jobs to be done perspective of that comes through really clearly. How can we put the controls in place, but also ensure we're getting the most for our spend? Becky, and you've got that contrast of Xero versus Sage 50. What does Xero do well to facilitate spend control natively as a system?
I think in terms of the native Xero spend management, I think you need an add-on. I think from the expenses platform that's built within Xero, I think it is great. That kind of does the job. But anything beyond that, I think if from a bills perspective, a bill can be approved, but there's kind of no workflow within Xero that lets you know when something needs approving. So we have to kind of add on to Xero in order to facilitate that, which is what we've done with Pleo, which is what we've done with a few other things that we use on top. So I think the great thing about Xero obviously is that everybody wants to integrate with it. So that's probably the best thing about Xero, is that the apps are there, that if you need to bolt on, that you can. But yeah.
Amazing. And I'm really keen to come back to kind of your journey a little bit later on, and what were the sort of the inflection points that led you to implement a system. But first, I'd just love to bring in Asif, in terms of, because you have such an amazing perspective with Cooper Parry, right? Like you'll see businesses from the sort of the embryo startup stage and what they do at that stage, all the way through the process. So great visibility about what you can do with Xero when it comes to spend management. So what do you see across your client base in this regard?
So I think in terms of how Xero interacts with spend management tools, I actually have a slightly different perspective on why I think Xero is critically helpful when it comes to these sorts of things. Is that you can scale with Xero to a point, and I know that's sort of at the heart of sort of this whole series as to at what point can you no longer scale with Xero. But the one thing that's quite useful about Xero is in the throughput of working with early stage businesses that you don't want to end up having too much individual people dependencies on certain processes and workflows. And what Xero does is it provides quite a nice common language for people within the finance industry to be able to come and work with early stage businesses. And so if nothing else, as a base layer, what Xero provides is a common understanding of how to come in and pick up processes and systems within a new organization, which actually more often than not is a sort of risk that you realize the hard way, particularly with smaller businesses where there's a lot of churn with individuals or people that set up the system then are no longer there when the company scales. And when you have a very bespoke system that is somewhat ERP in nature, it's then more difficult to find people to recruit who can pick up at that tech stack at that level. And so I think, for all the great things that Xero does, I will probably focus on the fact that it provides that sort of common taxonomy, as it were, of processes and API integrations, and just to be able to hit the ground running, which actually is a critically important thing for most businesses to be able to provide to candidates coming into a finance function.
Amazing. And so to pivot back from that to the inflection points, the growing pains. So Becky, I'd love to come to you. You talked about, I think it was 4 years ago, right, that you implemented Xero at Saragossa. When did you implement a spend management solution, and why?
So we brought in Pleo as our spend management solution in 2021, towards the tail end of 2021. So it was about 18 months after we'd moved to Xero. So at the time we were using Expensing, and at the time Expensing didn't have a native integration with Xero, so it was still a lot of downloading CSVs and re-uploading. And I wanted something that had the automation of just two systems feeding together. The thing that kind of really sold me on Pleo was the ability for employees to self-reimburse. And that was kind of I didn't want people to have to wait for their expenses. If they're spending money on behalf of the company, I want to be able to get that money back to them as soon as possible. And so there were a few things really that made it the right time for us to move. But I think that the main thing was just about reducing the amount of time it actually took us in finance to deal with employee expenses and overall spend. We were also going through a period of growth at that time, like being, with one credit card and being remote due to COVID. That itself kind of presented some challenges. And as we were maturing as a business, we were giving more people in the business roles that where spend came with it. So a marketing person and an IT person, and all of a sudden everybody's requesting, can I pay for this? Can I pay for this? So being able to track it all in one place was incredibly helpful as well.
Amazing. So that comes across really clearly. It's sort of you gradually reached a tipping point whereby it was not sort of sustainable or kind of advisable to continue without a spend management solution and without implementing Pleo. Amazing. Asif, really keen to come to you in terms of what you see again, like across the cross section of clients. When does the need bite?
For a spend management tool?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it really, and again, I can only speak from the experience of companies that raise capital, and from that perspective, they put gasoline on their plans effectively to go out and execute on whatever it is that they've sold to their investors as their grand vision. And actually, that is the point at which we almost have to grab some of these startups by the neck to be like, hold on a minute, before you guys go wild. we need to have some controls around how this is all going to be managed, because you do end up in that situation, and we've all seen it. So I don't think it's as taboo a subject as it may seem in other forums, that the credit card gets passed around, and effectively you have a credit card in the name of the founder or the CEO, and then that's being just passed to whoever. And nowadays, increasingly with some of our clients that are raising larger and larger seed rounds, the need for that control mechanism is even more urgent. And so, there are some businesses that are inherently in need of this sort of thing. So as Becky mentioned earlier, where you have a lot of sales staff that are out and about and entertaining and traveling and all that sort of thing, you sort of get a day zero requirement for something that you can visualize centrally. But more generally also, where even if businesses aren't as spread out, say geographically or through their activities, as I said, even if it's just from the perspective of forcing control and making up for lack of bodies, it's a nice way of bringing something in earlier than you may anticipate. And on the flip side, we do get a lot of businesses that also sort of say, well, actually, our business is quite straightforward. We don't need anything hugely convoluted on the spend management side. It's easy enough for us to just be able to get our staff to raise expense claims, and we'll reimburse them with the next pay run, which in itself is not hugely efficient. If you're thinking about people that are working at startups who maybe have taken a pay cut to work there, the last thing they need to be doing is cash flowing the business as well. So various different flavors of when the urgency sort of pinches, but certainly I think the overarching theme is that we would tend to recommend things earlier than the founder would anticipate.
Got it. And then Chloe, I'd love to hear it from your side. So you're obviously kind of working in customer success, helping Pleo users thrive with the software. When do you typically come in their life as a business?
It really depends on customer to customer. We have organizations that are very small, just starting, that are putting it at the forefront of their options. We also have customers that have been going on for years and years. A great example of an older customer would be, we see a lot of people, organizations in the kind of care homes, nurseries, hospitality areas, where petty cash has always been key, and they're like, okay, I need to get control of this. We want to put this more online, I guess that's the word I'm saying. And these are organizations that completely flip 360, in the sense of they're going from having cash on site to then using Pleo cards, putting everything through that kind of online app related process. And again, that comes from trying to get better controls, trying to make it easier as well for their employees to spend. Like, running to get a tenner from the petty cash is not as easy as just having your Pleo card, spending on it as well. So we do see a real mix of people in the journeys as they kind of progress. So it could, say like Saragossa, it could be a point when people are scaling, they think, right, okay, we need to get a hands on this, but it can be any point really of a journey for an organization.
Amazing. Well, I'm really keen to get into the kind of the headline act, so to speak, the kind of the grandstand of this webinar series, which is all about what you can do with Xero plus its ecosystem. So Becky, I'd love to come to you. Like, please, if you could give us a kind of a summary of what you've been able to do as a business at Saragossa by using Xero plus a spend management solution in Pleo.
I mean, I think for us, being able to cut down on processing time, and we're a team of 3 that supports a 30 million turnover business, and I don't think we would be able to do that if we were manually processing expenses still. I think one of the things that we've benefited from hugely has been Pleo's introduction of the cashback option, which means that most months, even though there's sort of 60 people on the platform, we don't actually pay to use Pleo, which is great. And we use it for kind of some of our biggest spend areas. So all of our LinkedIn licenses, which in a recruitment business are not small, they all go through Pleo, and it just enables us to just really have that visibility. And I also think it's quite I mean, scary, but nice to be able to go and look at actually how much money has gone through our Pleo account on a, on an annual, monthly, whatever basis. It's also really helped from a kind of a financial awareness perspective for our teams. So, generally speaking, in recruitment, our demographics are pretty young, so they come in without really much awareness of what a budget is or how to manage one. But with budgets set up in Pleo, they can kind of see where they are against that spend, and it does really help from a tracking perspective, or how many more meals can they buy for candidates or clients this month, or how much is left on the marketing budget for the event spend. So I think there's a huge amount of benefit that we've seen from using a spend management tool, just from a visibility perspective, an awareness perspective, and a cost reduction.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that, Becky. You get a really kind of rich perspective about what it's been like for you as a business, and the impact that you've been able to put in place. Asif, I'm going to come to you, and I'm going to be a little bit greedy, because so first off, I'd love to kind of dive into you'll have clients who have moved from not having a spend management tool in place to having a spend management tool in place. And so, love to hear from you about the impact that has had. But then also, if you have any sort of compare and contrast between clients that have implemented versus those that haven't, and any sort of contrast in terms of the impacts there.
Sure. Yeah. No. Absolutely. And one thing I think fundamental benefit that we are able to introduce to the sort of founders thinking around this topic is that with founders, you sort of go through that sort of number of stages of grief almost when you're sort of trying to introduce something that incurs cost, in that you sort of have to sort of convince them that it works, and then why it works and why it's good, and why that they shouldn't be worrying about the subscription and this cost and all of that sort of thing. But the one thing that I found that has always been a sort of cut-through benefit for most founders is the ability to set spend limits for their for various departments and for various individuals. I think that's the sort of gateway feature for a lot of founders to think of it as a net benefit to embrace technologies like Pleo or otherwise. And so that's one. That one is, I think, one that really complements also the way that we like businesses to think about how to manage their finances more holistically anyway, is on a sort of department level or a geography level or a service line level. And then for the founders to then be able to say, okay, well, according to our budget, we'd allocated X pounds for spend in that department. And so we can actually drill that down to an individual level as well. That sort of begins to get the founder to think of things that they can do in a much more expansive way. So I suppose that is both an example of the difference between a founder or a company that uses a spend management tool versus one that's not, but also one where it begins to actually influence mindset a little bit around thinking on scale, because there's inherently, particularly if you are on a sort of tightrope of cash flow, there is this inherent sort of fear almost that giving away the keys to the safe is going to be a very short path to bankruptcy. But providing this control framework, I think, is a real sort of benefit.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that, Asif. And I'm really keen to bring in Chloe now. So yeah, again, looking across the Pleo customer base, what have you seen people achieve when it comes to Xero plus Pleo?
Yeah, lots of different things to say. Xero for us is one of our strongest integrations. It was one of the first integrations we did. Just again, I think to how open they are to integrating with different ecosystems across the finance teams, and because of that, basically all of our features integrate really, really well with Xero. But what we've we've seen in that way is just allowing teams to automate as much of that process as possible. I think, Becky, you mentioned it around invoices. Again, we have the invoice feature. which allows people to upload invoices. It syncs with Xero. It allows everything to just flow in. So you can essentially do all of your bookkeeping in Pleo, and then it's tick the green OK, I think it is, in Xero, and it's kind of done there. So the biggest impact we've seen is that automation piece for customers across the board, really, and just reducing time spent and making it really simple for everyone to use.
Amazing. Amazing. And look, there's some great questions that have already come through. So I'm keen to kind of delve into those now. There's a question here, which I'm sure will be sort of relevant to anyone, around how do you motivate cardholders to provide receipts for their spending, which, since we have this opportunity, this is sort of evergreen advice. So let's take the opportunity that we have with the fantastic panel today to see what they've got in terms of tips for us. Who wants to go first?
I can start for the sort of the textbook answer, and then I suppose everyone else can give the sort of more practical answer. I think a lot of staff, particularly ones that have not worked in an organization before, maybe they're a little bit younger, maybe it's their first foray into working for a smaller organization, don't appreciate the need for an audit trail for a company to be able to hold records of things that they are claiming against, or that they are, say, claiming VAT against, or treating as an expense in their accounts with HMRC and the authorities. So there's a base layer requirement, which is a legal one. And actually, it's a good question, because it's not a sensitivity that employees tend to have. But I think that it's always wise to start with the fact that the company has a legal obligation, and then more generally around the control framework and making sure that there is evidence to support that things have been spent in the right way.
Amazing, thanks, Asif. And Becky, I'm going to come to you, because there was a knowing laugh there when the question got posed, that notwithstanding you being on mute, you could feel the empathy with the question. So I'd love to get your input.
Sure. Bribery, that's how we get our receipts. Presents, sweets. No, I mean, sometimes that is what we have to do. It's training. So before we issue anybody a Pleo card, we run them through PowerPoint training. We show them what a good receipt looks like. We show them what a bad receipt looks like, and any receipt is a bad receipt if it's kind of missing vital information. And we also make use of our intranet. So we use Notion. I don't know if that's something that people are familiar with, but our entire expense policy is documented on Notion, and we make everybody read it before we give them access to Pleo. And I think, like with any process, you have people that are good at following it, and you have people who are not so good, and it really is just a case of kind of repetition, drilling at home. And I know I kind of joked about the bribery, but we kind of do, again, recruitment, we kind of do a lot of incentives, a lot of shout outs, and it's actually amazing how far public well done for somebody who is historically being really terrible at their expenses, how much that can actually get the right behaviours from people.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Chloe, anything from your side?
Yeah, echoing both what Asif and Becky have said around training, just kind of guiding the team. What we've also tried to do at Pleo is we've built a really robust approval system and team management flow. And the idea is that we encourage companies to, push that kind of onto the managers a little bit, like make sure your teams have got their receipts in, make sure you're kind of pushing that message, so that it's not always the finance team that are having to chase for that information as well. So we try and empower our customers to kind of utilize that flow to help engage with receipt capture. And worst comes to worst, 3 strikes and you're out, freeze their cards.
Got it. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for that. And then there's a couple of questions here, which, no surprise, because this is a series about groups specifically. So there's a question: in the context of groups, can Pleo manage posting different card spend into different Xero entities? And then related to that, can spend cards be registered to different entities in the group? And what happens if a card registered to one entity is used to incur an expense on behalf of another? So Chloe, I might direct those, both those questions, in omnibus form to you.
Yeah, okay. I'll make sure I've got the question right. So if someone in one one company or one entity uses it for another entity. With regards to Xero, essentially that would entail a bit of intercompany accounting. You can't really pull one spend and then onto another in that way. You'd have to process it outside of these management tools. So it's not as simple as saying, oh, I've used my wrong card, I should have used this one. Realistically, like somebody would be assigned to an entity and they would spend in there. But there are ways, like I say, if you've got a strong ecosystem with Xero and with Pleo, you can kind of get it into the right place it is needed. But again, we would probably encourage people not to spend like that way. It becomes very complicated very quickly.
Amazing. And then in terms of different cards, would they all be registered to the, like, let's say you had a group of 10 entities, would all the cards be registered to the same entity, or could you register them to different entities in the group?
Different entities, yes, so you can have it in the right place. So we have obviously personal cards for employees, so you could be assigned to, say, entity X, and then you can spend with that card personally. We also have vendor cards, which could be related to the entity. So in the example, Becky, you gave about LinkedIn, when you've got all your LinkedIn licenses and you've got two entities, a US and a UK, you could have like a vendor card for the US LinkedIn on the US entity, and then the same thing for the UK as well. So yeah, you can have it all in one, or you can split it out. There's a freedom to kind of develop it as you need it.
Amazing. Look, that's great. And then I'm just going to take off my like CFO Techstack hat and put on my Mayday one very briefly. So for the first scenario there, right, of where, you know, card registered to one entity gets used for another, you know, that's where like Mayday's kind of brag bank feed or bank reconciliation across the group can really help to enable you to match that bank feed open in one entity to the relevant bill or invoice in the other, or even create it if it doesn't already exist. Now I know, you know, some like spend management systems will not bring it through as a bank feed or post it as a spend or receive money transaction, in which case you could use our recharger product. So this is the real, like, you know, as Chloe mentions there, the power of Xero plus its ecosystem, I think is this is an almost perfect example of that. So look, that's great. That's covering off those couple of questions. Next one I've got is around, you know, what's the best way to research and test spend management systems?
I mean, I can probably speak to that a little bit, just because we obviously have the full gamut of people using different spend management tools. I think what ends up happening is that you know, a lot of our clients will use one that they have incidentally come across. So whether they know another founder that's using it and can recommend it, or, you know, they've seen one at an event somewhere, advertising somewhere, and they've just sort of latched onto it. There doesn't seem to be a framework as such to be able to choose one to start with. You kind of, you know, maybe some people start with Xero expenses, they realize they outgrow that quite quickly, then they go to sort of Pleo and others, and then they decide that way. I think where it goes from there, that really then boils down to the individual experiences of the founders and their staff. So where for example, you know, you have a staff member and they're standing in the middle of, you know, Timbuktu trying to use their card and it's failing, whatever, and if that happens a couple of times, and if the customer services response isn't what they like it to be, then that tends to be what ends up influencing whether they stay with one provider or the other. And that's not to Pleo necessarily, that's just with anybody. And then there are, you know, certain card providers. I think that the prepaid card sometimes can be a little bit contentious with some platforms, that you can't always use a prepaid card to pay for certain subscriptions. And so that again becomes another reason where, well, actually we only ever wanted it to pay for our Google Cloud subscription or our whatever subscription, and they don't accept a prepaid card, and so then they, you know, that will push them down one or the other. But I suppose if I'm trying to sort of conclude anything, is that it is a little bit of trial and error. It's not really there's no sort of well understood framework to say this one is more suitable than the other, because your use cases will only really unearth over time, and which is where you will understand whether you're with the right provider or not.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Asif. Becky, Chloe, any thoughts from your side on that question about how to test and research?
I mean, just from it's been obviously a while since we've needed to, and when we did, there were only really two players, Spendesk and Pleo at the time, and now there's obviously far more. But I just approach it in the same way that I would any other kind of software implementation is to demo as many tools as it takes for you to find the one that you're looking for. And you know, our approach at Saragossa is, you know, kind of a minimum of 3 to compare pros and cons of each, etc. But yeah, that, I think that's kind of really it really is a case of using and seeing which one is going to be the best fit, because there's, like us, the opinion of the finance team is one thing, but it's the people that are using those cards every day, and you'll soon figure out if you've picked the wrong one, because your inbox will be full.
Got it. Amazing.
And yeah, just to add very quickly to that, like understanding exactly what you need from a platform, you know, Pleo and our competitors were very good at explaining exactly what we can and can't do. So understand what you need will make that a lot easier when you're comparing as well, because
amazing. Well, look, thank you so much, and great. Thanks everyone for the great questions there. I'm going to now come to our fantastic panel for their sort of one top tip for scaling with Xero as a group. So, Chloe, I'll come to you first, and then Asif, and then yeah, Becky, for you to close us off.
amazing. Yeah, I guess my top tip from seeing many kind of, I guess, integrations into Xero and Pleo, and seeing companies starting from, you know, just an Excel sheet to maybe having an existing system, would be just taking that time to really kind of cleanse what you have, understand how you set everything up, and then kind of go from there. We've seen a lot of organizations come in and piece it together, and it's messy and it can be quite difficult. So I'd always say just taking that time initially to invest in like cleansing, keeping your data very clean and centralized in Xero, then makes all these integrations to the different ecosystem super simple.
Amazing.
Yeah, I was going to, along the sort of similar lines, but more specifically on making sure that your chart of accounts is always exactly what it should be, and is reflective of the business that you think you're building, because that can then be quite a good framework from which to then understand what integrations do you need, how far can you scale this, scale this tech stack, et cetera, et cetera. I often find that a lot of people that have confusion around those questions, that confusion is reflective on their chart of accounts as well.
Amazing. And then Becky.
So probably a few things. Take advantage of free trials, because most software will offer it. But also, don't forget to disconnect your Xero from it after your trial's expired. And just, it's about, for me, it's about making sure that Xero is fit for us long term. So I don't kind of, once I've got a piece of software that I like and I enjoy using, I'm still keeping an eye on what else is coming. I want to make sure that I've always kind of got, that I always sort of know what's happening in the market. I think the CFO Techstack is a great way of looking at that. We implemented one of the suggestions from a previous one, from Then Close, which has been amazing. So I'm very happy about that. But yeah, I think the technology is changing so rapidly that it is just really important to know what is coming and how you can utilize it in the tech stack that you've got, without obviously having too many tools, because that's also potentially a problem.
Amazing. Well, look, thank you so much for that. Yeah, it's been amazing to kind of share the digital stage with you in this session. So what's coming up? So just kind of briefly, there's Pleo have got their upcoming Deminar next week. So more details will be of that in the follow-up email that gets sent out with the recording. And then tomorrow is the finale of this webinar series, with webinars 5 and 6. So we've got accounts payable with Sam from Thorn Ridgery, Hilary from British Financials, and Tom from Lightyear tomorrow to start us off. And then we conclude with foreign exchange with Cole from Genflow, John from Beaver and Struthers, and James from Airwallex. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for your fantastic questions and engagement. Once again, I just want to say a huge thank you to our fantastic panel, Chloe from Pleo, Asif from Parry, and Becky from Saragossa. And thank you for joining us. Please do subscribe to CFO Techstack to keep abreast with everything that you need in terms of information about how best to scale with Xero, and news about Stacked coming very shortly as the XeroCon equivalent for in-house finance leaders. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of the day.